In considering the Ice Age cycles, a critical factor comes into play which is centered on the nature of dynamics. The question is, are we looking at mechanistic causes for the Ice Age cycles or electrodynamic causes? We are all quite familiar with the nature of mechanistic causes, such as the dawn that begins each morning, followed by the sunrise, and later by the brilliant heat of the noonday sun, which sequences on to the sunset each evening, leading into the night. This daily sun cycle is a mechanistic cycle caused by the mechanical rotation of the Earth on its spin axis. Every part of this cycle is predictable with great accuracy. We have built clocks for many centuries with which to orient ourselves within the precise time frame of this predictable mechanistic cycle. The solar system is likewise mechanistic in nature. We know with great accuracy the position of all the planets in the solar system at any given time, because their movements are governed by mechanistic laws of mass and gravity interaction. Johannes Kepler had discovered these laws back in the early 1600s already. We understand these mechanistic laws so perfectly that when we precisely orient a spacecraft and adjust its speed, that it will arrive at a certain point in space at the exact same time when a planet that we aim to study also arrives at this point. No magic is involved in the feat of calculating space flight trajectories. Everything that is mechanistic in nature is mathematically predictable. For a time it was also believed that the Ice Ages were likewise mathematically predictable with clockwork precision. It was discovered as far back as 150 years ago that the Earth's orbit around the Sun is eccentric, and that the eccentricity is shifting in 100,000-year cycles. It was believed that these are coincident with the Ice Age cycles. It was further recognized that the tilt of the Earth's spin axis is shifting back and forth by 2.4 degrees in a 41,000-year cycle, and that in addition the spin axis wobbles in circular patterns in a 26,000-year cycle. The Serbian civil engineer and mathematician Milutin Milkanović had worked extensively on correlating the Earth's 3 orbital cycles during his internment as a prisoner in World War I. He theorized that the observed variations in eccentricity, axial tilt, and precession of the Earth's orbit determined its climactic patterns and gave us the Ice Ages. When the effect of the sunlight variations on Earth, caused by all of these cycles, is mathematically combined for the northern hemisphere, the computed result, called the Milankovitch cycles, mirrors to some degree the historic ice core data, though with major variations. The cases in which the computed cycles don't match the ice core data are significant. For example, the 2 previous interglacial periods actually began quite a few thousand years prior to the computed increased solar exposure that should have caused them. Also, the computed solar exposure is presently at a very low value, much lower than it had been during much of the previous Ice Age glaciation period. If one compares the current computed values with most of the values during the last glaciation period, the current value is so low in comparison with the last Ice Age that we should be in a deep glaciation condition right now, which should have started a few thousand years ago. What the resulting dramatic discrepancies tell us plainly is that the Ice Age climate cycles do not have a mechanistic cause, as was once believed, and is still widely believed, but have a dynamic cause that combines numerous interacting factors. In the mechanistic sense, the Earth's total exposure to the Sun is always the same no matter how and where the Earth's spin axis is tilted. The computed cyclical differences merely represented differences of solar exposure between the seasons and between the northern and southern hemisphere, while the total energy that is received on Earth from the Sun remains always the same. The same is true about the eccentricity cycles of the Earth's orbit. Whether the Earth's orbit is nearly circular, as it sometimes is during the 100,000-year cycles, or whether it is totally elliptic, the mean solar radiation that is received on Earth is the same in both cases. The differences are expressed only as variances between the seasons, but not in total energy received. This means that the Milankovitch cycles cannot be causative factors for the 100,000-year Ice Age cycles, as the total energy received by the Earth doesn't vary as the result of these cycles.
If orbital cycles don't cause long-term climate change, what does? What is the powerful climate factor that gives us the ice ages? The truth is out there. Caution. The truth is not found in the mainstream. The scientific truth about what does and does not affect the climate on Earth is self-evident. Is atmospheric carbon dioxide a climate factor? Is CO2 a climate change gas? Is it causing global warming? Will it prevent the return of the Ice Age? CO2 is a minuscule trace gas with no practical climate effect. CO2 is so rare in the atmosphere that only 390 parts out of a million are CO2. It is this insignificant. Compare 1 million as a measure with a mere 390. Let us make a more graphically meaningful comparison. If you were to offer $390 for the purchase of $1 million mansion, your offer would be so insignificant it would be laughable. But this is the CO2 ratio, for which entire nations are being destroyed economically and millions are put to death by starvation. A single man would be invisible in the sweeping view of the vast landscape of Mount Everest, the highest reaching mountain on Earth. But this is comparatively the CO2 ratio of 390 parts per million. Now consider that the man-made portion of the global atmospheric CO2 adds up to 0.25%. Then the comparison is between 1 million and less than 1. This ratio of 0.25% is the highest ratio recognized by Dr. Zbigniew Jaworowski, the chairman of the Central Laboratory for Radiological Protection in Warsaw. He placed the man-made CO2 ratio into the range of 0.05% to 0.25%. If $390 would be too minuscule an offer for $1 million house, adding 97 cents to raise the offer would be a joke. Yet this is the ratio that humanity's carbon footprint is all about, for which the massive world depopulation is demanded by the masters of empire who hate the human presence. In comparison with the height of Mount Everest, the man-made addition to the atmospheric CO2 at a measure of 0.25% would be comparable in size to a shirt button or a raisin. In order to reduce the CO2 increase in the world, which always fluctuates by natural causes, vast quantities of food are being presently burned in automobiles in the form of biofuels. The agricultural resources that are presently diverted to the biofuels production is so enormous in size that it would normally feed 100 million people. This is as many as the masters of this game are murdering each year in the largest silent holocaust of all times. That's roughly 10% of the 1 billion people who are forced into chronic starvation by the burning of food and the forced underdevelopment to keep the human carbon footprint small. The biofuels holocaust, under the guise of preventing man-made global warming, is constantly increasing as the legislated consumption of biofuels is doubled, tripled, and is now up to 5-fold in some areas, while farm output is diminishing as the colder climates of the already ongoing slow Ice Age transition is taking its toll. The resulting scarcity is used to drive the prices through the roof, whereby ever more people end up with empty plates, becoming forced to die. Yes, we presently kill 100 million of our own kind each year by burning their food to prevent the man-made carbon increase of 0.25% of 390 parts out of a million, or less than 1 in a million. We have become murderers for the sake of a raisin that we add to the tallest mountain on earth by our living. Ironically, this isn't called a crime. Yes, the greatest crime in the form of the greatest Holocaust in the entire history of humanity is in progress for the sake of reducing atmospheric CO2, which itself is so critical for all life on this planet that without it, not a single blade of grass or flower or animal or bird or fish or any living being would exist. Being caught up in the mainstream is not a safe position for anyone today, as the mainstream has become a stream of indifference and has become a murderous stream. No, CO2 is not a significant climate factor, much less so is man-made CO2. But it has been bloated into a giant ghost-like myth that has become a huge factor in the political climate of the world, even while it is known that the CO2 is not a significant factor in the energy budget of the Earth.
However, a major dynamic factor that is well known does cause enormous variations in the amount of solar energy that is actually absorbed on the Earth. This particular factor is determined by the intensity of cloud formation. As we already noted earlier, the tops of clouds are white and highly reflective. Their effect is that instead of absorbing the solar energy that is incoming to the Earth, the white top of the clouds reflects a major portion of the solar energy back into space. The reflected portion of this energy is lost to us completely. It is not merely redistributed. When the intensity of cloud formation is increasing, the climate gets colder by this process that is reflecting an increasing part of the solar energy that the Earth is receiving back into space. The ratio at which the incoming solar energy is reflected back into space is not a fixed factor, as it reflects changes in water vapor density and cosmic ray density, which are the major factors that affect cloud formation. The effect is not a small one. It is a common experience on Earth that nearly everyone is familiar with, that cloudy days are colder. This means that the processes that affect the extent of cloud formation on Earth affect our climate in a big way. If our atmosphere was not affected by cosmic radiation that stimulates cloud formation, the climate on Earth would be significantly warmer. Of course, without clouds, we wouldn't have any rivers and agriculture and any land-based life at all. Clouds play a vital role in the life dynamics of our planet. However, the ratio between clear skies and cloudy skies is not fixed. This means that our climate is affected in a big way by the various processes that affect this ratio. It has been a common experience in recent years that cloudiness has been gradually increasing, and that the Earth has been getting colder at the same time. Since this process is still continuing and is increasing, one could count the experienced increase in cloudiness as a precursor for the coming transition to the next glaciation cycle on Earth. However, one single precursor, no matter how tangible it may seem, is simply not sufficient to suggest that a transition is in progress. We need to see many other coinciding precursors to recognize that a major transition may indeed be happening. In order for this recognition to be possible, we need to understand the dynamics involved in the process of cloud formation. These further steps of exploration take us far beyond the sphere of mechanistic concepts to the dynamic processes where vastly greater forces are involved that are not predictable with clockwork precision, but which are nevertheless knowable and understandable, and are recognizable by their unique elements of physical evidence. This opens up a whole new field of exploration, the field of cosmic ray particles, which are critical for cloud formation and for our understanding of the climate process. Cosmic rays are energetic charged subatomic particles originating from outer space, composed of familiar stable particles such as protons, atomic nuclei, or electrons. They can have energies of over 10 to the power of 20 electron volts, which makes them about 1,000,000 times more energetic than what a typical particle accelerator can produce. They are electrically charged, and as they enter our atmosphere, they interact with its molecules and causes them to be ionized, which causes water molecules to clump together into seeds for droplets that become visible as clouds. The critical role that cosmic radiation plays is generally ignored in the cloud formation theories, though it is one of the main causative elements. Only in the recent period from 1990s onward has the cosmic ray connection with cloud formation become more recognized, as it becomes ever more plainly evident as a causative factor. the cloud dynamics are generally rather poorly understood. Clouds are heat engine. A great deal of energy is required for the transformation of liquid water into a vapor. For example, it takes a lot of energy for your tea kettle to boil completely dry, to turn its contents, of typically a kilogram of water, into a vapor. This energy is not lost. It is latent energy that is invested in water vapor. When the vapor is converted back into liquid droplets, the latent energy is released. This release happens by the process of cloud formation, and it happens in a big way. A large cumulus cloud can contain as much as 1 billion kilograms of water. By its forming, the latent heat released would be the equivalent of the energy required to boil 1 billion tea kettles dry. This heat energy keeps the clouds afloat like balloons in the sky. The convection within the clouds takes the heat to the top, where a greater portion is radiated into space than is reflected back to us on the ground by the heat in the clouds, for a net energy loss. It is believed that the greatest portion of the greenhouse energy, up to 48%, is located in the cloud dynamic process, in which cosmic radiation plays a large role and CO2 none at all. Of the remaining portion, 43% is believed to be caused by the absorption of incoming solar radiation, on which CO2 has no effect either. The major energy portion of the Earth's greenhouse is located at the blue end of the visible light spectrum, the high-energy spectrum. The Earth got its name as the blue marble from this feature. The band of the energy spectrum is located far distant from the narrow infrared bands in which CO2 plays a minor role. Only 9% of the greenhouse heat is recognized to be the result of ground radiation, where CO2 plays a role, and a minute one at that. The big factor, and the hugely variable factor, is located far from the CO2 arena. The big factor is the ratio between cloudiness and clear skies, where CO2 plays absolutely no role at all. The bottom line is that in order to understand our climate dynamics, it becomes necessary to understand what causes the cosmic ray flux to vary so dramatically that it affects this variable ratio between cloudiness and clear skies, and thereby determines our climate on Earth.
The key to this understanding is located in our understanding of the solar system's electric dynamics. With the sun not being a nuclear furnace, but being electrically heated at its surface, as has been discovered decades ago, the resulting electric action at the surface of the sun causes a constant stream of electric particles to be accelerated away from the sun to speeds of several million miles per hour, called the solar wind. The solar wind is an electric wind, a wind of electric particles. The resulting outward-oriented electric wind pressure decreases with the square of the distance, so that far beyond the orbit of Pluto, the pressure is no longer strong enough to maintain the fast solar wind speed in interaction with other plasma in space. The interaction slows the solar wind down to below the so-called cosmic speed of sound, of roughly 100 kilometers per second. The heliopause behind the termination shock is the theoretical boundary where the sun's solar wind is stopped by the opposing interstellar medium. This is the point where the solar wind's pressure is no longer great enough to push back the interstellar winds, which too become compressed from the bow shock inward. This dynamic process of constant collisions driven from the inside and from the outside creates a plasma wall around the solar system, which also creates a magnetic wall. This wall forms a significant barrier against the cosmic ray flux from interstellar space. The effectiveness of this barrier against interstellar cosmic rays, commonly called galactic cosmic rays, is primarily determined by the magnitude of the solar wind pressure. And as one would expect in such a dynamic electric system, the magnitude of the solar wind pressure is not a constant factor. The solar wind pressure, which creates this structure, is affected to a large degree by the intensity of the solar activity, which in turn reflects the density of the electric plasma that is powering the entire system. While there will always be a heliosphere around the solar system for as long as the sun is active, the size and the density of it invariably becomes decreased when the sun becomes weaker, which is presently the case. Long-term satellite measurements have revealed a long-term weakening trend. The currently ongoing solar weakening has not only been measured in space. It also coincides with the measured increase in cosmic ray flux that the Earth is bombarded with and the corresponding cooling effect of the Earth that is also being experienced and has been measured. The bottom line is that cosmic rays bombarding the Earth dramatically enhance cloud formation. When cosmic ray particles interact with the atmosphere, they are known to generate secondary particles. Among these are the muon particles. The muon is a basic particle like the electron, but is 200 times more massive. However, it is extremely short-lived, so that the presence of muons in the atmosphere is an indicator for cosmic ray interaction in the atmosphere. Since the interaction indicated by the muons should theoretically cause an increase in aerosol nucleation that is known to cause cloud droplets, we should see a temperature increase due to the released latent heat that's corresponding to the ratio of detected muons. It has been discovered that a close relationship does indeed exist between muon ratios and air temperature. In fact, the correlation is so close that the two curves almost totally overlap. The correlation proves without a shadow of a doubt that changes in cosmic ray flux density causes corresponding changes in the intensity of cloud formation. At the CERN Laboratories Cloud Project, the interaction of cosmic rays and aerosol nucleation was further tested experimentally by injecting simulated cosmic rays into a test chamber loaded with water vapor. Without any artificial enhancement, only a slight amount of aerosol formation occurred, as was presented in an LPAC video on the CERN results. In the second phase, an electric field was added, which is always present in the atmosphere. At this point, the aerosol nucleation increased rapidly. In the third phase of the CERN experiment, the simulated cosmic rays were added, and as the result, the measured increase went right off this chart. The CERN experiment did prove rather conclusively the principle of cosmic ray-enhanced cloud formation. While the experiment in a 30-foot test chamber can't duplicate the full scope of cosmic ray interaction that is orders of magnitude larger in power and scale, the experiment has proved the principle of the theory with some rather dramatic measured results. It is critical for us in facing the Ice Age challenge that we advance our understanding of the climate dynamics. With the sun affecting our climate in a big way, and the sun becoming weaker as the Ulysses mission has measured, the question to ask ourselves is, what is affecting our sun? Actually, the phenomenon of our sun getting weaker is not mysterious in the electric universe, because the sun is not its own master. Our sun is surrounded by vast streams of electric plasma that power it from the outside. If the plasma density gets weaker, so does the sun. We live in an electric plasma universe. Electric plasma affects and powers every galaxy, and every star or sun within it, and every planet.
The key factor in understanding the terrestrial ice age dynamics and the precursors that are already evident is located in understanding the electric nature of the universe. Nothing is more fundamental for it than this. Gravity was the focus of astronomy from Kepler onward, but in the 21st century the focus is shifting to electromagnetism and plasma. According to researchers associated with the Los Alamos National Laboratory, 99.999% of all the observable matter in the universe exists in the plasma state. We live in a plasma universe. Because plasma consists of free electrons and protons, plasma is a good conductor of electricity than copper, silver, or gold. Lightning offers a dramatic manifestation of this conductive property. However, plasma electricity is also subject to gravity. All matter is subject to the force of gravity, including the plasma particles. What makes the plasma particles unique is that they also react to electric and magnetic forces. The electric and magnetic forces are 36 orders of magnitude stronger than the force of gravity. Nor do they diminish with the square of the distance as does gravity, but only linearly, which gives these forces a near infinite reach. It is hard to acknowledge that plasma in space is electricity that responds to both the force of gravity and the electric force. Electric plasma is attracted to the sun by its gravity. In this interaction, the electric density becomes great, to the point that an electric charge separation occurs. When the built-up tension becomes great enough, an electric arc discharge occurs with the power of the electric force. On Earth, the discharge is seen occasionally as lightning. On the Sun, the arc lightning is continuous and universal. It illuminates the Sun from the outside. The reactive region is called the photosphere. When the discharge becomes too explosive, it occasionally rips a hole into the photosphere, which reveals the lower region of the Sun as being dramatically darker. It also rips a hole into the theory that the Sun is internally powered by a nuclear fusion furnace deep within. If it was, the lower layers would be brighter instead of being darker. Great efforts are being made with convoluted theories to rescue the solar nuclear fusion concept. So far, none of these efforts have been able to explain what forces, other than the electric force, would cause the solar winds to be accelerated to millions of miles per hour as they flow away from the sun and thereby heat up to millions of degrees. Ultimately, it will be acknowledged that our sun is an electric star, and all the stars in the universe likewise, even that the universe is electrically powered and is thereby anti-entropic in nature. The factor of electric density is probably the most significant determining element in the dynamic interplay in the electric system that creates and maintains the solar heliosphere. If we are looking for ice age precursors, we will find them in this system long before they become evident elsewhere. So, what do we find there? What we find there is amazing. NASA's Ulysses spacecraft has measured a 20% decrease in solar wind pressure in a time frame of 10 years. The Ulysses mission was launched in 1990 to encircle the Sun in a unique orbit that carries it both over the Sun's poles and its equator, giving Ulysses a global view of solar wind activity. The principal investigator, Dave McComas, tells us that the observed reduction makes the heliosphere the weakest it's been since the monitoring of the solar wind began almost 50 years ago. The spacecraft made 3 orbits around the Sun on a polar trajectory. The values received from the 3rd orbit, shown in blue, were radically lower than those received during the 1st orbit, shown in green. While the speed of the million miles per hour solar wind hasn't decreased much, only 3%, the change in pressure comes as a surprise. It is made up of reductions in solar wind temperature and also in solar wind density. In the time frame between the 3 orbits, the solar wind has become 13% cooler and 20% less dense. Ulysses also found that the Sun's underlying magnetic field has weakened by more than 30% since the mid-1990s, which reduces the natural shielding against cosmic rays even more. Ulysses cosmic ray data shows, as one would expect as the result of the lower solar wind pressure, that the high-energy electrons in the giga-electron-volt range have increased in numbers. They have jumped in numbers by about 20%. That's an enormous jump. This jump is an undeniable telltale component of a climate change precursor and ice age precursor that is manifest in increases in cosmic rays reaching the Earth. It is known from measurements in structures that formed near the end of the last ice age that the cosmic ray flux was twice as dense during the glacial period. With a 20% jump in cosmic ray flux having already occurred during the last 50 years, we are presently a fifth of the way towards full ice age conditions. If this progression is linear in nature, we will experience full ice age conditions in 200 years. However, the rapid decline in solar wind pressure that the Ulysses probe has measured suggests that the progression toward the next ice age is exponential rather than linear. In this case, if the trend continues exponentially, we will be in full ice age conditions in just a few decades possibly before 2050. That's the awesome precursor that Ulysses brings home. With this achievement completed, the Ulysses mission was closed down in 2009 after nearly 19 years in operation, putting the onus on humanity to act on its discovery. To the best of my knowledge, the Ulysses mission was not closed down as a result of equipment failures. Officially, its mission objective had been achieved, but in the light of its discovery in 2008, that is critical for the future of humanity, one cannot help wondering if a deeper reason might not have stood behind the termination of this mission, as its finding countered the global warming dogma, against which high-profile opposition is not allowed.
The answer to the modern paradox, as we see the door more and more closed to the advance of science, and this at a time when the most critical challenge to civilization lays before us, is not found in politics, where many a blocking factor is located. Johannes Kepler would suggest that the key to solving this kind of paradox lays within ourselves. The key to the solution, as he discovered, is our self-discovery as human beings, on which every other solution depends. Johannes Kepler, who became famous in the early 1600s for his breakthrough discoveries in astronomy, by which he became recognized as potentially the founder of modern science, would say to us that the solution to any such paradox of the type we face today is not rooted in politics, but in society's self-discovery of its humanity. He would say this based on his own experience. If the movement in civilization of society's self-discovery is missing, nothing will be achieved, and society finds itself doomed. If, on the other hand, there is a strong movement on the front of humanist self-discovery happening, all kinds of doors begin to open that, in most cases, weren't even known to exist. That's what science is all about, he would say. Science is a facet of humanity's self-discovery as it challenges the frontiers of the unknown. If this movement is honest, no empire and politics can block its advance. The door to freedom opens on this front and is secondary and subsequent to it. Only through this door can the freedom be gained that uplifts the physical living of humanity with the power of its creativity, productivity, technological development, and humanity in politics. Civilization unfolds from this, driven by the power of scientific development that is the essence of humanist development. Civilization is not a gift handed down to us on a silver platter. It is a gem to be earned, a power to be developed, and a horizon without limits to be ventured into. With it, the Ice Age challenge doesn't really pose a challenge. No, not at all. This is how Kepler would address this issue, and urge us to do so likewise.